Welcome back to the IBFP. Here's your host, Foxy New.
Who is next for David Benavidez? And look, let's break it down honestly and objectively as possible. And we all know that Canelo Alvarez is set to fight John Ryder, his mandatory, in May. And then right after that, he's planning to fight Demetrius Bivol in a rematch. This has been Canelo Alvarez's plan before David Benavidez even signed to fight Caleb Plant. We've known this for a long time that this is what Canelo Alvarez was planning for this year. This is no secret. So the question remains, who does David Benavidez fight next? How does he keep this momentum going? Where there's three logical choices. There's David Morrell, an undefeated, hungry young fighter. There's Demetrius Andre, an experienced veteran fighter who's also undefeated, a former world champion. You also have a current world champion in Jamal Charlo, undefeated, experienced veteran fighter. So all three of these guys would make a great fight for David Benavidez. All of them will be a different stylistic clash that I would love to see, and I think would be intriguing fights at all of those situations. But make no mistake, I'm going with David Benavidez to beat all of those guys. I think his pressure is going to be too much. I think David Benavidez's size is going to be too much for those guys. And I think his hand speed is going to be too much for those guys. That doesn't mean that those aren't good fights. I just think David Benavidez is a step ahead of all of those fighters, especially at this point in his career. Now look, let me break it down. The question is, will any of these guys have the nuts to step in the ring with David Benavidez? You turn and look at Demetrius Andre. This is a guy who's turned down the biggest fights of his career against guys like Idislandi Lada, guys like Sergey Devryanchenko. These are opportunities that Demetrius Andre has let pass. Jamal Charles, He's even passed on an opportunity to fight Canelo, and what I mean is he could have been the mandatory to Canelo right now, but he chose to pass up on that by simply not fighting Zach Parker. This is the same guy who avoided, a guy like Janabek, so we can't forget that. So the question is, will Demetrius Andre find his nuts and fight David Benavidez? Will he step up? And then you look at a guy like Jamal Charles. Will he step up? This is the same Jamal Charles who called out David Benavidez a while back. Then once David Benavidez responded, offered him the fight, he was nowhere to be found. Nowhere to be found. He's even turned down a Canelo Alvarez opportunity directly. Jamal Charlo has turned down David Benavidez opportunities, Demetrius Andre opportunity. He's constantly turning down great opportunities. We've seen this from Jamal Charlo. He was almost retired by Palatero and Montiel. So at this point, will he have the nuts to take this fight? Because all he does is clout chase and call names, but he ends up fighting nobody. So will Jamal Charlo locate his nuts and fight David Benavidez? And then you look at David Morrell. Now, when I look at David Morrell, he's a little bit different. This guy is young, he's developing, and he's ready to step into the big leagues. And I want to see him fight one of these big names. But David Morrell and his own team have already turned down an opportunity recently to fight David Benavidez, stating that they're not ready for that fight yet. So at the end of the day, David Morrell has already stated he wasn't ready. His team doesn't believe he's ready. So will they find their nuts and step up and fight David Benavidez at some point later in the year? Will he feel like he has enough experience by then? Will he be ready by that time? The question is, will any of these guys locate their nuts and fight David Benavidez? Because men lie, women lie, but the facts don't lie.